But I wish Billy Powell, because keeping the nostalgia alive, there are coaches right now, varsity basketball coaches in the state of Indiana that are young, and I'm sure, along with their players, that don't know the history of Indiana high school basketball. And I think that's the first thing that a coach should do, is sit down in a classroom with his players, girls or boys, either one, and say, I want you to learn a little bit about the history of this game and what it means to people like you and I and others before us. I'm looking at a book right now that's on my coffee table that was written by Herb Schwolmeyer. He started in 1970 writing a book called Hoosier Hysteria, A History of Indiana High School Basketball. And he authored his last book, his 9th edition, in 1997. And I can't begin to tell you, Billy, how thrilled I was the first time I met Herb Schwolmeyer. And at that time, he was the dean of men at Butler, and I was doing the St. Joe basketball games. And to go into Henkel Fieldhouse and to interview Herb Schwolmeyer at halftime. He officiated state championships. He broadcast state championships. He was a committee member of the Indiana Basketball Hall of Fame, and you can go on and on and on and on. And this book, I just was looking at it again, just full of information. I love it. And to think I did from 77 to about 81 or 2, a lot of great Indiana high school state basketball games, the Final Four and the championships, great players. Billy, I was seated courtside, and Stacy Turan took that shot right in front of me to win that game for Broad Whipple and beat Marion. And I have to tell you that what I remember more than anything is that Larry Little was the head coach at Marion at that time. And his assistant coach was Mike Lord, who had been an assistant coach at Hebron. And Hebron played in the Kankakee Valley sectional when I did those games. And I would go, I spent a fair amount of time up in Lake County. And I would go to the Hammond Civic Center on Friday nights to see Hammond Clark play, and Larry Little was the head coach. So I had kind of an affinity and affection for Larry Little as he developed his career, winding up. But to my story, yes, there was jubilation when Broad Ripple won that game, but knowing Larry Little and Mike Lord, their facial and body response when they lost that game, I felt so badly for them. And I feel so badly for anyone that experiences that. The emotion of sports, certainly winning is great, losing is not. I remember Jack Ford when he was the head coach at New Albany. He coached in my nearby area, Brook, which is now part of South Newton. But they were in the Final Four this particular year, and I had interviewed him, and he did this every time you interviewed him, I found out. Before he would leave you, he would slap you on the shoulder, and he said, I just want to tell you, the only way to have fun in this game is winning. And that was his mantra. And that's the mantra of everybody. But that was an experience with Jack Ford. I remember doing the state championship with Vincennes and Gunnar Wyman, Orlando Gunnar Wyman. And he had already told the school system, I'm retiring at the end of this year. And to win the state championship, isn't that unbelievable? His last year. And then the guy who replaces him, Gene Miller, who has now won over 700 games as a varsity basketball coach at Kankakee Valley. I was there when he got the job at Kankakee Valley. And then he goes to Vincennes, Washington, Lafayette Jeff. When he was still at Kankakee Valley, and I apologize for being windy, I got a hold of Joe Heath, who was the athletic director at that time. I said, Don Lostutter was leaving, I believe. And I said, I have a guy who I think you really ought to consider for the Lafayette Jeff basketball job, Gene Miller. And Joe Heath was a great guy, coach and AD at Jeff. Class. He said, we just don't think that he's got enough experience at this point in time to coach Lafayette Jeff. Well, fast forwarding, he wound up at Lafayette Jeff. But, you know, the paths that we cross, I'll share, and if you want this to be the final story,